Oh,
So, hi everyone, welcome to the Coaching
great.
Corner podcast. This is a podcast for honest conversations. You know me, real and raw, a space to help you understand how other coaches are working, how they're building their practice, and how they're growing their business along the way. So, each episode, I sit down with coaches of all kinds of backgrounds and we talk about the messy bits, the mindset shifts, and the moments where possibly they nearly gave up and what's helped them to keep going. So, whether you're starting out or whether you've been in the coaching corner or the game a while, you'll find inspiration, insight, and some straight talking encouragement in here. So, I am so happy to welcome Andreas to the Coaching Corner podcast. Andreas is a match creator and he developed the Circus Question. So I know you're all intrigued. What is the Circus Question? So, Andreas, just tell us a bit more about you and what this Circus Question is all about.
Hi, Sarah. Lovely to be on your podcast. The Circus Question is a compatibility tool. It's part of the Circology framework, which is my methodology for compatibility. So helping people connect, have meaningful connections in the dating world, in relationships, moving into HR, and in any field you want, really, even with your friends, to identify cracks in relationships. Some coaches are using that now, and you know, it's quite flexible, and I'm surprised how much has evolved in 15 years.
Yeah,
really.
I love that. So I've never been on a dating app before. And I know, like, for those of us who have never even like seen a dating app, like, how is this different from any of your other dating apps that you might come across?
Okay, well, the Circus Question, being a compatibility app, it's not a dating app per se. What it is your assistant, your tool to help you identify your ideal partner. But it's also a tool to avoid toxicity. You know, at the end of the day, we need help. On dating apps or in real life, today it's got really quite ridiculous, really. People are ghosting, people are gaslighting, people are, fake profiles. All these things are making people scared to date. So I created this tool 15 years ago when I became single myself. And I was in my late 40s, and I was looking for a serious relationship. And of course, dating sites had appeared. They weren't quite what they are today. They weren't monetizing quite the same way they are today. There weren't as many fake profiles, but there were enough. So much so that I had to kind of think laterally. I come from an architectural background, a creative. So my mind thinks, I can make this, I can design something that will help me. And that's where it came about. I designed a question to unlock compatibility. And the Circus Question, and I will share it with you and your listeners and your viewers. I will share it with you because ultimately that's the only way to learn, is to actually take part. So, Sarah,
Don't do this to me,
we're filming in the morning now.
We're doing a real life demo now.
You're terrified. I know you're terrified. The thought of dating. Good. you know, when I was, I'll tell you what I was doing when I was coaching, but basically this was my opener on dating sites. This is what I used to say to people. I used to say, because I was looking for people to connect with, but I was equally trying to be comfortable or help them feel comfortable in this guy introducing himself to them, but without the hi, gorgeous, or whatever tacky message might be. You know, I like your photo. Obviously, I'm messaging you because I like your photo. So I devised the question to say, hi, I appreciate something in your profile, and I really want to know, and I'm curious to know the answer to this question because I've got my own answer and I want to share it with you. And I'm interested to know yours. So this is the question. Sarah, I know you're not stressed, so you don't need to take a couple of deep breaths. But if you need to ground yourself, by all means do.
I think I need to grab a strong drink.
You can close your eyes. You can close your eyes or put a sheet of paper in front of your face to avoid the embarrassment. But anyway, Sarah, imagine you're at a
Okay.
circus. Imagine the lights, the sounds, the smells, the fun, the laughter, the thrills, and the suspense. Now close your eyes for a moment and imagine if you were one of the acts or performers, which act or performer would you be and why? When you're ready, you can share it with me.
So it's funny that because first of all, I'm quite a visual person. So I just saw each of the different people around when I've been to a circus. So the person selling popcorn, like all of the audience and that. The main character that stood out when you asked me that specific question was this hula hoop lady that I came across. I was like mesmerized by this woman when I went to the circus, and she had all of these hula hoops just going around, and she did all of this like fancy stuff, and she had these amazing costumes on, and it was that character there.
Okay. And you saw yourself doing that, or you just enjoyed her? This is quite
Yeah,
specific.
so first
Just in that visualization we
Yeah,
just
so
did.
first of all, it was her to get the image of her, and then it was as if I was that person doing it.
Okay, interesting. You mentioned a couple of things first, that you saw the popcorn seller and the audience in the background. Okay, that kind of counts to a certain extent, but not necessarily. We'll examine very briefly. We'll examine your role, and your role is your unconscious selection. And I know you practice NLP. The first part of the question is conscious location.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine the circus, lights, sounds, whatever. So we're building an image. The second part is the embedded command of imagine you are one of the acts or performers. So your unconscious selection picks something that you relate to. So your association with the hula, obviously you had this vision in your head already, but if you didn't like her, you would dismiss it. So you're holding that image in your mind. And you know how the unconscious works. We associate and we relate. And so to me, what it does, it tells me that your selection puts you on a scale of polarity, which is the psychology framework. And the framework relies on power dynamics and masculine, feminine essence. So I won't get too technical, because if you want to know a bit more about it, you can get the
You
app
can read the
or
book.
chat to me and I'll tell you all
Andreas
about it.
has written books as well.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that later on.
Yeah. So in terms of polarity, and I'll use my diagram because I can't share my screen. Where are you? Hula hoop. Right, you're 3.5. So we've got a number scale here, and it's back to front, obviously, because it is. But basically, this is the psychology polarity spectrum diagram. And people at the top, lion tamer, the extreme, wants to lead a relationship, and people at the bottom, the lion being the extreme, wants to be led. And this is we're not talking about abuse here. We're talking about consent. So consensually, the analogy works to select your role and then identify your partner within that framework. Okay. So if you were a lion tamer, your ideal partner would be lion. Obviously, because it completes the relationship. Now you're hula hoop. So if you're hula hoop, you're about 3. And all this zone here, this light blue or the blue area here, and the blue area at the top, these are the extremes where your ideal dynamic is direction and leadership here in a relationship, and support, intuition, the feminine energies at the bottom, the masculine at the top. So a traditional relationship would suit you because you liked direction from a partner. It doesn't mean that you don't direct as well, because the bottom doesn't mean weakness. Okay. This is something I elaborate with in the book and whatever. But what it does is it identifies what you shouldn't date. And what you shouldn't date, because your choice is numbered, it's a number 3, we're looking for a perfect 10. Now, a perfect 10 means ringmaster, I'm a ringmaster, it's a 7. Hello, you're perfect. Partner would be somebody who communicates
Yeah.
with you quite a lot, shares the dynamic, gives you strength when you need it, but you're passive supportive. In fact, you're a little bit more than passive support, you're more active. But you're also allowed the autonomy to be yourself. If you were a lion, that autonomy wouldn't exist as much, because you would want the control from a partner, and you would be happy with that. Now, for the purposes of just the analogy, I mean, we're familiar with the program George and Mildred, if you remember that program, where the woman was the dominant partner, and the male partner was the not so much submissive but supportive partner. And she would say, George, do this, and George would say, yes, Mildred, and go and do it. Without George, Mildred was nothing. The Queen and Prince Philip, were a good example of this. She was the star, he was the support. Reluctantly, he was the support, but he grew into the role. In this case, we're looking for a partner, so we kind of need to shortcut things. So we're looking for identifying our ideal dynamic. Now, in the app, it describes your positive and negative traits. Your positive traits are when the relationship is healthy. That's what we're looking for. And the negative traits are when the relationship is negative or toxic. We don't want that. And you can probably identify with those negative traits because you'll see them in yourself. You don't want to see them. For example, lion tamers' negative traits are insecurity, trust issues, obviously, jealousy, which some people think is healthy, but it's definitely not if you're on the receiving end of it, and you're not, you know. So if a lion tamer is in the right relationship and his jealousy is not triggered by the wrong partner, for example, a balanced dynamic, someone in the middle here who's in a balanced dynamic, who wants to share equally the relationship, which is where the modern relationships are these days, where partners share the bill, they share the mortgage, they share everything, and they talk about where they're going to go on holiday, who's going to pay for this, who's going to, you know, it's a very balanced relationship. It doesn't mean it's not balanced outside, but the dynamics are more extreme. And they're accepted as extreme. I often used to get clients say to me, I wish my partner would decide where he wants to take me. I wish my partner would just pick a restaurant and take me there. And I used to think, why do you not know where you want to go? And they say, well, he knows I like Italian. Just take me, surprise me. And the same, and this goes for a lot of things, including the bedroom, okay, where the partner doesn't want to keep instigating stuff. They just want to be directed. So all these layers, well, I call them layers, fulfill a really good relationship. But where psychology starts is a foundation. It's a base to build on. Now, if you avoid toxicity, that's a key, isn't it? Definitely. So in your case, being a 3, you want to avoid numbers that actually don't add up to a 10. In fact, you can, the zone 11, 12, 13 is just about okay. But where they're extreme, for example, 2 lion tamers are a 9 and 9, 18, they would clash because they'd both want control of the relationship. So the power dynamic would be loggerheads, okay? And the same with a lion tamer with, say, a flying trapeze, which is 5.5, that's 13 and a half, so 14 and a half. The flying trapeze would probably answer back and say, no, I don't want to do what you're telling me. I'm autonomous. I want to be independent. And a lot of relationships have imploded because of that. And I'm sure, you know, I don't know your previous relationships, but when I was coaching, I'd often refer people to the traits that were negative. And they go, yeah, that was my ex-partner. And they'd ask the ex-partner, especially if they had kids, they'd ask the ex-partner, like I have. I haven't had kids with ex-partners, but I'm friends with some of them. They ask them the question. And being able to actually... Absolutely. I've asked them the question. Well, one of my partners, and I can share this, she said elephant. And she doesn't look anything like an elephant. She was a catwalk model, 6 foot tall, extremely not like an elephant, but stubborn, immovable, very intelligent. So all the traits of the elephant. But the thing is, she was stubborn, and she needed direction. As much as I'm a ringmaster and I don't mind directing someone, I actually want them to be autonomous. I want them to stand on their own 2 feet. Sometimes I like to be, I like a traditional relationship. I like to pay the bills. I like to open doors. I'm a
Yeah.
gentleman. That's what I call myself. And in the 80s, of course, when we were emancipated as men, I went on a date and I went to open the door to this young lady. And she looked at me and she went, "Don't you think I can open my own door?" And I went, "Well, yeah, of course. But I'm opening it for." She stood there. She said, "Let the door close so I can open it myself."
I love it. Do you know,
That
it's
was the
like,
end of the day. We got in the
yeah.
restaurant.
Being a
It
psychologist,
was
so
dead.
being a psychologist, the psychology of this like really fascinates me. Also, like I'm into like the stats, the numbers, the evidence base around it. So when you said like I asked my ex-partner and then they came up with this and it fit that kind of character perfectly. Like what kind of tests have you done around this? Like how have you validated this other than your own personal experiences?
Right. Okay. Well, 15 years ago, as I said, I was testing this. Testing it, I started dating. And it became a test because with the hundreds of, people that I was swiping right on that I was messaging over the 3 years probably, I started coaching people that I wasn't compatible with because they came back with an answer, and although I fancied them, I'm not, swiping right on Tinder, for example, they come back with the answer. "Oh, this is interesting. This is my answer." And I was like, "Oh my God, you're not compatible with me because I've decided this is what
Yeah,
I need, not what I want. This is what I need." Because I used to lead relationships with what I
yeah.
wanted. So I used to find someone I fancied and then try and fit the square peg into the
And
round
I
hole.
find that
Big
that's
mistake.
quite a common thing though, isn't it? Like I'll take this person, but actually I don't quite like this about them, so I'll try and change this. And I know like let's
Well,
focus on what
looks.
we can control, actually picking the right partner from the start instead of picking someone who is totally not aligned and then trying to change them.
Well, I have three C's: communication, compatibility, and
Mhm.
compromise. And the compromise part is what happens at the end. Too often people compromise at the beginning. They realize they fancy someone and they, whatever it says in their profile, for example, "I don't
Yeah.
want kids,
Oh, they change their
but I
minds.
fancy her. I'm going to make her want
Yeah.
to have kids." I tried that once because I was dating someone and they actually turned around and said, "Well, I don't really want to have kids." I thought, wait till you get to know me better. You're really, I'm going to change your mind. And you know what? To this day,
Yeah.
she hasn't got kids and we are best friends. At the end of the day, you have to compromise after your compatibility is sort of foundation,
Yeah.
solid. That compromise can't be not having
Mm.
kids, by the way, unless you've totally decided you
Yeah.
don't want them as well. The kids question is a big one. And so often on these dating shows, it's the last thing that they
Yeah.
talk about. Moving, location, all the Love is
It's
Blinds and
so
whatever.
true.
The last thing they talk about is, does he want children?
Yeah.
And is he going to move to Leeds? I'm living in London. Is he going to move to Leeds? Well, the answer is no. And oh my God, what was the point of that 4-hour show
Yeah.
that I've just watched? Anyway, going back to what we were talking about, I started with this inquiry, as it were, stealth inquiry, I call it, where I was asking this question, getting an answer back, identifying whether there was any movement forward with this
Yeah.
relationship. And before I explored it, in other words, I found myself with a whole inbox of people that I had to kind of go, "Look, we're not compatible for this reason." And that's when the coaching evolved, because I started telling them in detail why we weren't compatible, in a nice way, and explaining to them, this is what you
Mm.
really need, not me. You
Yeah.
need this. And they started coming back with, "Oh, wow, that's really interesting. Thank you for letting me know," rather than just ghosting me. I appreciate that. Can I come back to you? And I'm going to ask the question to someone else that I like. Can I come back to you and let you know how it goes? So I was hundreds and hundreds. And this was all on Tinder. And my inbox looked like a proper
I love it. And
practice.
so that's how
And,
you
and I really
started. That's
enjoyed
how
it.
you started your coaching journey in terms of like seeing that you weren't compatible and then coaching people around who they are compatible with. If I
helping
was,
people.
because when people get into coaching, some people don't necessarily know what it is that they want to specialize in terms of who is their ideal client, what kind of challenges that they want to help people with. How did you know? Like, was it from the very start because of your dating journey that you knew that you wanted to be a dating coach specifically?
Okay, it took me 3 years to find my partner. So it wasn't a shortcut at that time, probably because I was looking in the wrong
Okay.
places. And that's not just, I'm not talking about just Tinder. She found me. Funnily enough, she found me. She contacted me from the point of view of
Yeah.
coaching. She saw my profile on another social media site, and she said, "Look, I'm really interested in what you're saying, and I'd love to talk to you." Unbeknownst to me, I'd love to talk to you, as in, let's see if we're compatible. But she wanted to try the circus question, and she also was curious if we were compatible. Now, I'll tell you now, in age, we
Okay.
weren't. That's the reality. You were an age gap relationship. My immediate reaction was no. No. Yes, you're gorgeous, but no. You're too young. I was looking for 30 something, and I am late 40s. Someone who wanted children, because I didn't have any kids. So those were my specifics. Those were my needs. They weren't just
Yeah.
wants, they were needs. I wasn't going to date anyone. Previously, I might have dated someone and tried to make them want
Yeah.
what I wanted. I realized that wasn't going to work. So I decided this is what I needed. A very big difference,
Yeah.
wanting and needing. This is something I self-taught myself with the coaching. Understanding our wants and our needs are totally different. So in that 3-year process of free coaching, thousands of free coaching, and most of them were American, because the English didn't want to pay. And I didn't feel that I had the right to try and coach
Okay.
people. I didn't think necessarily I had the professional tools, but I also felt what I created was unique, and I couldn't see
Yeah.
it anywhere. And I thought, well, if I'm creating my own framework, I kind of need to test it myself. If I go to try and find another framework like it, then I'm like Myers-Briggs, whatever. They were all multiple questions, creative. No, this was one question. So anyway, when you say data, interestingly, I coached an empirical scientist once. When I say empirical scientist, that's what she called herself. She said, you need the empirical data to back your theory up, your
Yeah.
hypothesis up. And I said, okay, right. So I'm going to have to start writing everyone down. You're this, tick, 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 to create a. Do you remember when we were kids, we used to do the A, B, C, D thing and create, and the vowels always one, E usually, but all the vowels one. You know what I mean? And I had all these, and I'm thinking to myself, why am I doing this? Is it relevant that you're a hula hoop girl? Is it relevant? You might be 1 out of 10,000. Is it? It's only relevant to you. And you know what? I started realizing that as much as there's a science behind stuff, this is art. Love is art. You fancying someone is not a science. The chemistry around it is, but you deciding who you like. I could never tell you who you like.
Yeah.
Correct? You will look at a painting. I will show you 3 pictures. One will be traditional art, one will be abstract art, and one will be modernism, which is not exactly abstract. It's somewhere in the middle. I won't know until I know you, Sarah, what one you're going to pick.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I often talk about our first impressions. So I talk about the brand that we have, the impression that we make on people, and people make up their mind. They say within like 1/10 of a second whether they like you or don't like you. So it's interesting the depth that you'll go into, because even though you've got that depth, do you find that still, like, then there's this attraction that you get when you first look at someone, when you first see them physically, and then you find out the depth later, and then that creates the depth of the relationship. But it's the initial attraction. Do you still find that?
Absolutely, yes. And clients that use my question, the initial attraction is attraction, physical attraction. It's not, you're not dating blind. And when I say you're not dating blind, you see a profile, or you see someone in a bar or in at work, you get to know them physically. You see their face, you like their posture, they're, you know, whether they're confident or whatever it is you like about them, correct? Now, the reality is this: we're trying to negotiate or navigate a foundation based on what you are towards what they are. So by identifying yourself in dating and coaching, and relationship coaches will tell you this, until you know yourself, how can you share yourself with someone else? In other words, if you love yourself, you can love someone else. If you know yourself, you can know someone else. So until you know yourself and have healed from any, look, I'm not a trauma coach, or I don't work with that. I usually pass people on, or I get them, especially in my contracts. I will say to people, I want you, one, to commit that you're not seeing a therapist. And if you are, I want permission from them that it's okay for us to work together. In my discovery calls, that's something I talk about.
I think every coach should be doing that.
I'm not a therapist.
I think every coach should do that.
Well, yeah, they should be. I mean, that's
just asking that.
Yeah, and I've got several that I work with, I collaborate with, that I recommend, depending on what country you're in, what the time zone, and whatever. But what I'm saying here is, what's important to me is and I'll share this with you. I was the kind of guy that would find a girl, have fun, and then decide whether they really wanted to be with her. And that usually meant having sex, because that's what I prioritized. Now, it's not that sex isn't important, but it usually led me into the rabbit hole that I didn't want to go, because sex maybe was good and I was negating the foundation that I needed for myself. So it's the talk the person into
also,
it. So I decided I was celibate for 2 years.
To different people. So for some people, it could be fun. For some people, it's once you have that's a commitment, like for a long-term relationship. It can mean so many different things. So once you get into it, it can be dangerous territory, can't it? That you started something that then leads on to something else when you interpreted it to mean something very different.
And do you know what? This is okay when you're 18 to say 25, 30, let's say. Because you're playing the game, you're learning about yourself, you're trying new things. You've got, I'm not going to tell people don't have fun. But what I'm saying is, even if, and I have a saying, people say to me, I always attract the same kind of guy. And I say, well, look, if you, and the first phrase they say to me, I suppose I've got to kiss lots of frogs before I get my prince. And I say, you know what I've decided on my mind is this: if you kiss too many frogs, you end up with one, because that becomes normal.
Yeah.
Okay. So aim at prince. I know not everyone's the analogy. Aim at prince. Aim your standards as high as possible. And I'm not talking about superficial standards here. I'm talking about potential. I often use the analogy with my clients is this. I mean, do you play any sport?
Do I play any sport? Do I enjoy sport? Not really. I used to.
No. Okay.
Well, I used to
do you play chess? Do you play drafts? Do you play Scrabble? Okay. Do you play Scrabble or chess or anything like that? Okay. All right. The analogy is it's going to fall on deaf ears. But look, if I'm and I play squash, but let's say I play tennis, and we all know the tennis pit, the court. You hit the ball over, it comes back. You hit it over, it comes back. You have a bit of fun. However good you are, you have fun if it keeps coming back. But if you hit the ball over and the person hits it in a completely other direction, it's a bummer to go and get the ball, isn't it? Right? Now, in a relationship, if you're incompatible, it's the same thing. It becomes frustrating. After a little while, with all intents and purposes, you want to play tennis. But if you're not playing with the right kind of potential, and that's the key word here, then you're never going to get better, but you're also going to get frustrated and resentful. And that's where I come from, the dating world. I look at it from, if you've got a good foundation, it's not perfect, but it's perfect enough for you to build on. That's the aim of the game. So you're picking a partner based on potential, but knowing your potential as well. Yeah. So if I can serve and volley and return a ball, then if I pick someone that's going to smash me to pieces, they're going to resent me. But I'm also going to resent them because I can't compete.
Absolutely. I love that analogy because there's so much meaning in that. And when you talk about it, I can definitely see that like playing out in different relationships as well. One thing that you mentioned about this circus question is that it's great if you're looking to date someone to find out compatibility. You also mentioned about in current relationships, it's good to be able to see some of those gaps, some where that mismatch might be. Can you just tell us a bit more about, like, if you were in a relationship now, how would you use that question? How would you use it to navigate your relationship and your differences as well?
Okay, well, in my dating period of 15 years ago, I met a few, people were online and oh, I'm a dating coach. Oh, I'm a therapist. Oh, I'm a couples counselor, or I was, a couples therapist. I'm like, okay, interesting. And they do the question. They go, do you think I could use this in my practice? And I say, well, why not? Because look, when you're identifying incompatibility, you're looking at the cracks. Now, those cracks may not be huge. And if those cracks aren't huge, they're repairable. I use the analogy of filling the cracks. Yeah. If you can fill them properly, they can't be seen. If they're huge, then you're never going to bring them together. Okay. So, but if someone's coming to a couples therapist, they're coming because they think they can fix the relationship. Now, and this is how two people have used them in their practice, they fired the question like I did to you, to the couple at the same time. They've both answered at the same time, and it's become apparent, for whatever reason, one or the other, by their choices, where their differences are. Now, if it's irreparable, it's going to be irreparable whether the question works or not. But it highlights the difference. For example, if one of the partners is lion, the man is lion, and that's very much the Rambo commando kind of guy that can't associate himself with femininity. He's like the macho man, drives the big trucks kind of attitude, and plays sports, and the wife at home, she does the cooking, she looks after the kids. I don't want any part of that kind of relationship, which works for some women. We're talking traditional relationship here. But if he's with a woman who's a standalone CEO of a company, and she's in her masculine herself, and she conflicts, the only way they're going to navigate this relationship, even though they actually really love each other, that word love, is to actually identify the cracks and see how you can navigate the issues. For example, allow him to be in his masculine, allow him to have some control. I'll get back to something in a minute about that. And because often couples go to therapists about sex. And I had a couple once come to me about this issue. The wife said to me, look, I want him to dominate. It was funny enough, it's after 50 Shades. 50 Shades. Yeah, exactly. And she said, I want him to dominate more. And I said to her, okay, what do you want from him? Do you want Christian Grey? Do you want him to beat you up? I wanted to see what she. And she said, no, yeah, actually, I do. Well, not beat me up.
You know what? Control. I bet there's so many women out there that didn't know that they wanted this until 50 Shades came out.
Well, yeah, it's the light bulb, it's the epiphany, isn't it? So I said to her, look, there's two, being a quite dominant alpha male, okay? I saw it like this. I said, look, two things. You're quite dominant yourself. You're quite, as a persona, she was quite intimidating. You need to learn to not be so intimidating in the bedroom. Just learn, relax into your feminine side. But what you need to do is allow him to dominate you. If you want him to dominate, don't tell him to do this, because he doesn't want to do it. Because she was saying, can you spank me? I'll give you an example. Can I spank me? And he'd say, no, I'm not going to hurt you. And she'd say, just, because spanking isn't hurting necessarily, okay? Christian Grey stuff. Grab me by the throat, pin me to the wall, take me. And he's saying, no. But, a man who isn't used to that or doesn't really feel it won't do it unless he's encouraged that it's his idea. It's his idea to do it, okay? So discuss it in a roundabout way where you're encouraging him to be in his masculine, even though it's a little bit uncomfortable. If you want she gave him the ultimatum. You do what I want or I'm leaving you. Grown-up kids now. You do as you want, as I want, or I'm leaving you. And I said to her, and this is the first couple I ever kind of coached, I said to him, well, I need to speak to him as well. So he came one night, And I spoke to him. It was really uncomfortable for me because I've never done this before. And I said, listen, your wife wants this, and she's told me stuff in confidence, and you want, I can see what you want. So I said, listen, I'm going to actually have a session with you and understand you. And I was exactly right. He said, I don't want to be forced into a situation. I want to feel comfortable that I want to do this. And I said, listen, if you don't feel comfortable, don't do it.
Yeah.
End of. But she's giving you an ultimatum. And maybe you need to play and have fun with this and see how you feel. And they did exactly that. She allowed him to dominate her by feeling a little bit more submissive and just shutting up, literally shutting up. And I said, blindfold her, take control, create a scene, have fun, don't hurt her. No, don't hurt her, you know what I mean. Because he said, she's the mother of my children. I can't beat her up. And I said, listen, I understand. And this is one of the problems a lot of men have. Because they're protectors. Once they have kids
then?
with them,
like, just watch 50 Shades, do it like
that. I won't say too much. I can't reveal too much of my private life. But let's say 50 Shades is tame. Okay. There are scenes in 50 Shades that seriously are, I mean, come on, he stalks her. That's not what you do. The rules of engagement of BDSM is not stalking someone. That's breaking the rules. You can engage with someone, but you don't stalk them. You don't go to their workplace and try and that some of that stuff is hairy fairy. Anyway, because consent is the key with BDSM. Okay, so consent, but allowing someone to do something to you, they then take over. They have to be allowed to take over. So where we go with couples, with regard to couples here, is show people the cracks. Show people, because if you're already going to couples therapy, there are cracks.
But like you said, it's like the cracks aren't that big that they don't want to like heal them, because they're willing to go to the therapy to like explore whether they can continue the relationship.
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, look, you've got to give them credit for going to there in the first place. Anyone that comes to a coach or a therapist is already, giving up smoking or going to an LP or whatever. You've decided, Weight Watchers, you've decided the first step is taking control of your actions and doing something. So I always feel when someone comes to me for coaching, it's not they've given up.
Yeah.
It's not they've given up. They've come to me because they actually want to take that step forward. The ones that normally given up don't go and see a coach.
However, saying that, Andreas, that's really interesting, because first of all, I've got two questions. So the first question is, you've kind of interchanged the going to see a relationship coach and a relationship like therapist. So it'd be interesting to know what the difference is between them. And also, you mentioned about like the desire for it. So I have some people in executive coaching where, say, for example, their manager has told them to get coaching. So they come in because they're intrigued or because they've been told to. And I can imagine that being the same in a relationship as well. Well, my wife or my husband or my partner says that I need to come and see a relationship coach. And they're not necessarily coming there willingly, like of their own free will, if you like. So how does that work?
Well, this is really interesting, this point that you made, because I've often thought about where are we now in society where we rely on coaches so much? And the reality is this: in the traditional world of hundreds of thousands of years, let's go back a few hundred years, in the village, you had a support structure around you, and your coach was your auntie, your friend, the mayor of the village. I mean, where I come from, I'm Greek Cypriot. The mayor of the village was the go-to person, and if she was a woman, she often was the doula, which is the birth mother, the birth helper as well, whatever you call it. It's gone out of my head now. But basically in the village there wasn't a hospital nearby. They were having natural births at home, so she would be, the person that came along and helped. But she was also the person you spoke to if you had any issues in your relationship, because she knew both of you. Now, coaching's taken that place of someone you can trust to help you. Okay. Now, you mentioned therapy and relationship coaching. to me, relationship coaching is going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dealing with anxiety, from something that you're looking at in the future and thinking, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this relationship, that relationship? Whereas therapy is dealing with the depression, let's call it that, of having trauma from a past relationship. Because to me, you need therapy if you've had a problem.
So the
That's
reason
how
why I
I see it.
asked is because my dad actually is a trained counsellor, and he worked for Relate. So that was like marriage guidance therapy.
Okay.
So that was more therapeutic. So looking at any trauma that had happened in the past and helping them heal from that, so that they could like heal their relationship, their current relationship at the same time. So that's interesting. Do some people get kind of confused in terms of, like, when they come to you, are they quite clear as to how you'll help them with coaching, rather than it not being the therapy looking back at trauma and things like that?
Yeah, when someone comes to me and they say, I can identify immediately that they've got past trauma. Excuse me. And I say to them, listen, with all due respect, I don't know if you've healed with this. Most people have had experiences. That's the product of where we are now, is the experiences we had before. But if they feel that those experiences have happened to them rather than for them, which is important, if it happens to you, you're blaming all the time. You're the victim. If it happens for you, you've learnt the lesson and you're moving forward. I can move forward with people. Blaming and victim shaming and whatever else, and he was like this. I haven't got the toolkit. That's not me.
And that's
So I
such
will
a, I
refer them
love
to
how
someone
you
else.
simplify things into like one simple question, like the circus question, but also like, do you feel like that happened to you or for you? That's a really important question to understand where someone is in their journey. Are they still almost like in that relationship, even though they're not physically in it, they're still mentally in it? Or have they moved past that? Because it makes me think about people. I know a lot of people come to you after having like a narcissistic ex partner, and then they'll come to you like wanting to find something different. And I find that sometimes if you haven't healed from things, then you attract the same things in a way. Have you worked with people who have been in narcissistic relationships and managed to find love after that, like lasting love that they're more compatible with?
Of course, that's the answer. Of course, and because of the psychology polarity spectrum, which, as I said to you, we're all on a spectrum. Where we lie on that spectrum identifies what we need, not just what we want. And what I demonstrate to people is, if you are somewhere in the middle, and you're seeking a balanced relationship where you're sharing, decisions, you're being able to be your independent self, your autonomous self, especially women. Listen, I only coach women now. 15 years ago, I was coaching men as well, not from the dating sites, but because they were friends of the women women were saying, I've got this friend, he's a guy, and he needs help. And, the male ego gets in the way. That's the best way to describe it. The question fell on deaf ears. Yeah, so what? If you look at astrology, for example, in synastry, the matching of the stars and compatibility, the majority of people that believe in that are women. Partly because they understand, not necessarily they understand the spiritual side of it, but they accept that there's something more to it. And that's not necessarily a science, is it? Again, is that an art? Is it a science? We don't know. The Indians believe it's a complete lifestyle. Indian matchmakers, even when you're matched, go to and get Vedic astrology done. And if those matches do not work, they literally say, listen, you're not compatible. You're going to have to break up, even though they've just met. So if we apply this science art to life in general, and I was saying to you earlier about HR, I've got a couple of people that are testing this in HR now, and I know you coach in HR, or you coach companies. They're testing it to see if people are compatible for the job roles they're applying for.
That's interesting.
But they're also checking to see if the by knowing the people within the framework. For example, if you're hiring internally, okay, which a lot of companies do, and people are stepping up normally, they're asking the question and seeing if they're compatible for that role. Are they going to be leaders? Are they strong enough characters for this? Now, of course, you can use Myers-Briggs, you can use the Big Five, you can use all the different tests that there are out there. But a lot of them are questionnaires that kind of 20, 30, 40, 100 questions. One question is quite easy. And it quickly identifies where they are. And as a filtering system, especially on dating sites, you haven't got time to sit there and ask 40 questions to someone to identify whether they're compatible with you, especially if you're kind of not sure. You've got 3 guys in front of you and you're thinking A, B, or C. Which one do I go out on a date with? Because I like all 3 of them. The question immediately identifies, you know, what level they're at. If they're all exactly perfect for you, let's say in your case, you said ringmaster, they said ringmaster, then you've got 3 potentials there, and you date potential, don't you? That's what we date. We like a look of someone, but we date potential. Everything else falls into place afterwards.
It's
whether
so
they're,
interesting.
I don't know, kind to the
It's just
service
so
staff
interesting how one question can seem so kind of like how could you find your ideal partner from one question? But when you're talking about it, there's just so much depth to it. And it just makes me think if it can be used for like selecting people, if it can be used for partners, can it be used for like friendships as well?
Yeah, of course. Well, look, I have friends, and the thing is, when you identify with the same traits, often you will know each other very well. In other words, if you meet another hula hoop dancer, I'm going to say that, you have similar traits, so you will identify and share values. You will share a lot of things in common. You might not like the same music, but you will definitely, your character, positive and negative traits. You know, I mean, you're quite guarded. Part of the hula hoop, you're within that hoop. Your safe space is on stage doing your thing. You know, you can look at it in the app. But basically, people that are larger than life, the lion tamer, for example, is flamboyant, charismatic, struts around, I own the stage. They are going to be, I'm not going to say like Tony Robbins style character, but they're going to be larger than life. I own this. I don't know if Tony Robbins is a lion tamer, by the way, but you get that. And if you are a lion tamer and you meet another lion tamer as a friend, you'll understand each other very well. But in a relationship, you will fight for control. And the chances are, even in a friendship, you will fight for control and adoration. The chief adoration character is the clown, by the way. The clown wears a mask. So they'll wear that smile or happiness to get love. They'll give love to get love, and they'll want love back. Now, that's not a bad thing. None of the choices are bad. They're perfect for the person that chooses them. This is why it's quite unique, because we often say, and I hear this all the time, opposites attract. Sometimes. Lion tamer and lion, the extreme opposites. But what about likes attract? Acrobats, they need each other. They're in a way codependent, because without what, you know, they stand on each other to make the show, don't they? Well, if they're not codependent, one falls over. He's holding them up and he's not balanced right. They fall down. Now, there is room for that relationship in this world. And from the outside looking in, we say codependency is terrible. Well, so is lion tamer and lion. So, you know, if you're not a lion tamer, you don't want to be a lion. Sorry, if you're not a lion tamer, you don't need a lion. And you don't want that relationship. You look at it and you think, Jesus, she's a doormat. But unless she's being abused, and the abuse only happens really if that person wants to be more autonomous.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, if they're in the wrong dynamic, So look, I'll be honest with you. When I created the question, it started off with a direct question: what would you be in a circus?
Can I just ask? Like, I know people will be wondering, like, why the circus? Like, why the circus?
What the hell? Well, you know, and I'm going to go back to, and I do you know the Dick Fosby, the high jumper?
No.
Okay. I'm trying innovators design, what they call it, innovators. I think it's called innovators design. Dick Fosby was a high jumper in America in the 70s, and he wasn't one of the best. And when he came up for the trials for the Olympics, he wasn't doing that well. So, the original high jump was basically just straddle. They just literally ran up to it and threw a leg up and flipped over. So he designed, by not being as good as them, he designed his own system. And that system was to do the backflip, the Fosbury flop. And now that's normal.
Okay.
That is what everyone follows. So the innovators, I can't remember the term for it, but to enable yourself to get ahead of the game, you have to create something that is not only unique, but is yours, and do it well. And when I thought of the circus question, I was thinking there's so many characters in this internet. And there's so many dynamics that are playing out. And I've been a ringmaster. I've dated all types. I don't have a type. I've redhead, blonde, brunette, green eyes, blue eyes, whatever, small, tall, whatever. So I thought, God, if I'm looking for a person, what am I looking for? And I didn't know. So I thought, what kind of area in the world, where can you find different relationships? The circus tent. The circus tent is unique because you've got all these freaks, all these shows, all these acts that are very different. And they have partnerships. The clown works with the audience. He conflicts with the other clowns to get attention. His love is the audience. Love me, I love you back. Make you laugh, I'll show you more. The lion and the lion tamer. The flying trapeze, the catcher catches the flyer. Perfect relationship. So I thought, hang on a minute, I'm a ringmaster. I asked myself the question, I could be with any one of these acts. But what suits me the most? I don't want someone that's going to be just sat there waiting for me to direct them all day. Because I've had that. I had an elephant. Elephants are, what are they? This is my list again. 2.5. Although that's quite close to me, with as close to the 7, with 2.5 and 9.5, there was still something lacking. I needed more autonomy. I needed more independence. I needed her to be strong to stand on her own 2 feet without me being there all the time. But I also didn't want a lion tamer that was going to try and control me. I wanted someone that would listen. And the same for a woman. They want what they need. So I thought, if I create this visual of these relationships and ask this question, then I'm going to get something that comes back to me that's going to be compatible. And it evolved from 1 or 2 different questions, as in, what would you be in a circus, which didn't work originally. It worked because people would say, well, I don't like heights. I think I'd do this. I thought, I'm not getting the right answer here, because they were thinking consciously. I wanted unconscious selection, which would give me their truth. So then when I created the location unconscious selection, I then started getting 95% positive reactions, where I would go back to them and say, you're like this because you're like that. And they go, oh my God, how do you know that? From this one question, and people go, how does that one question work? Have you been talking to a friend of mine on social media? You can imagine. And I'd say, no. Now, there are those that it doesn't work for them, or especially clowns. Clowns are a really good one, because if someone says, I'm a clown, and you say, well, you have this persona, which is kind of like dual personality, and you can be very introvert, take the mask off, you're an introvert, you're very dark inside, you're crying inside, that John Lemon says, you're crying inside, you're smiling to the world. And they go, that's not me. And they're often in denial. My own brother's a clown, okay? And I see it playing out every time we meet up. And he's a lovely guy. But when it's dark, you do not ask him what's wrong. He wants to be left alone.
Yeah, but they don't recognize.
And if imagine you're up with a partner like that, that partner doesn't want to be asked, are you okay? They want to be left alone. So you kind of, again, the couples therapy thing, if you're with a clown and you keep saying, what's wrong, darling? What's wrong? Let me help you out. Sometimes let them go and have their reset. Let them go and have their space, and they'll come back when they're ready.
Definitely.
Do you know what
Absolutely.
I mean? So it's now, this chart is like 50, 52, 53 acts. And by the way, they're not all just acts. There's side shows as well. You've got Better Nails, Snake Charmer. Circus Activist is an important one. Circus Activist. Because that's a role in itself. Because people say to me, I don't like circuses, I'd blow it up. And I go, okay, what does that say about me? And I go, okay, well, it says this and that. And I go, oh my God,
I love it.
how did you figure that out? I say, well,
you
you're
can
an
be
activist.
anti-circus and it still works. So, Andreas,
well, yeah, because they're in control. They want to be in control of relationships.
One of the things that I want to ask you is, because what I've noticed from the book launch that we did, from your circus psychology and everything that you're doing there, one of the things that you're really great at is like promoting what it is that you're doing in terms of your exposure. So going on to like I think, have you been on TV at one point? You're on radio, you're doing all sorts of things. For coaches who want to develop like their own unique system, their own unique like methodology and way of doing something, how would you recommend that they go about like getting exposure, like getting onto podcasts, media, all of the things that you do when you've got something that you want to share?
Okay. Well, first of all, from a podcast point of view, there's on Facebook, there's a group called Find a Podcast, I think it's called. Maybe not exactly that, but there is a group where you can offer your podcast services, something you're passionate about, and discuss maybe past trauma to how you became a coach, and so you get a lot of exposure that way. I recently joined that group, and it's also podcasters looking for people to put on podcasts. Okay, so the way I look at it is this, right? I've evolved into this, so I can't kind of say, and to be honest with you, fact, I went to a meeting in London to look into coaching as a professional qualification. And the first thing they said, it was a 3-day course. The first thing they said was, coaches do not advise. Okay. And I was like that. Hey? Hey? You don't give advice. Football coaches, they give advice. I don't give it. No, you ask questions to unlock what the person already knows. So you're helping them find out what they already know. I get that. Circus question. It helps them identify what they already know. But this is my experience. I've mentored more people than I've coached. So technically I mentor people, but the term mentor always kind of grits with people because Americans don't really understand mentoring. They prefer coaching. So coaching in America tends to be a little bit more fluid in respect of, you're going to still advise me.
Yeah.
Okay. I find it very difficult to coach someone, just ask them questions, I hope they can figure it out themselves, because to me that's long-winded. I like to use my experience to help them. If I can't help them, then I'll move them on. Now, using the analogy of what I said about Dick Fosby and myself, if you feel you've got something that's quite unique and is going to help people, then by all means research it, test it out. If you've got the tools, which I've evolved over time, to help people using analogies and understanding dynamics the way I have. I mean, I specialize in dynamics. I haven't gone into therapy because from my point of view, that's left for those that have done it and really know what they're doing. So I kind of look at how I can help people moving forward. So I'll help you become a better tennis player and hopefully reach your potential. And I do have this thing where I say to people, if you are, what percentage do you feel you're applying to the relationship that you are going into? And if I asked you that question, what percentage of you are you giving? And often people will say, well, 70, 80%. And I say, well, that's where you're going to fail. Because as an athlete, if you're not giving 100%, you're never going to get better. Imagine giving 70% of the effort.
Yeah.
So If you give 100% of yourself, you're going to improve. Your potential is going to grow. But that will only happen when you're with the ideal person. So with coaching, I feel if you go all in, you really understand what part of coaching you want to do.
Definitely.
What part you want to learn or study, or if you're going to be a therapist, be a therapist. If you're going to be a lifestyle type coach where you're helping people move forward, move on from limiting beliefs, etc., then do that. Tony Robbins is a great example. He's not a qualified coach, whatever, yet he's helped millions of people around the world. Because life is about learning, isn't it? I mean, I currently offer my Circology framework as a certification. It's something I've just started doing. I'm building the certification to help coaches, relationship coaches, dating coaches, and matchmakers specifically use my methodology and framework within their practice to help them help their clients. Because at the end of it, it's a results business.
Definitely.
That's what we
And
want.
I love
If you're
your
a dating coach,
journey
if you're a
that you've
relationship
been
coach,
on with that, because I know that you started off in a place with that, and it's developed along the way into then looking at like actually creating a whole system to be able to help other coaches, other relationship coaches. So just tell us a bit more as we're like coming to the end of this podcast. Just tell us a bit more about how people can contact you and what people can contact you for as well. So if they're looking to date someone, if they're looking to like start a coaching business that's relationship coaching, or they're already doing that, how can they contact you, and where do they find out more about this circus question?
Okay. Well, I've got a new website, updated website. It's called circology.life. Circology, CIRCOLOGY.life. On there, there's loads of contact details, but you can find me on Facebook, Andreas MatchCreator. MatchCreator as opposed to dating coach, because I started helping people in the professional world create matches, because at the end of the day, that's what I'm about, creating meaningful connections. So the dating coach thing from matchmaker's point of view was, well, I kind of don't need a dating coach services. And I'm going, okay, how can I help you? I'm a match creator. Okay. So I'm on LinkedIn again, Andreas Match Creator. And as I said, through the website, you can find my email address, but you can also find the link to the app. There's two apps. One is a professional app, which is the Circology Pro, and the other one's Circology, the Circus Question Pro, which is C Pro, and the other one is the Circus Question, which is the direct to consumer, which is what a lot of people would be using on dating sites and etc. And that's the-circus-question.passion.io. We're not in the stores yet, so we're not on as an app. It's a web browser link, so you can get through to that. And of course, you can contact me by email. And we're beta testing at the moment. We've been beta testing for a while, to be honest with you. I'm trying to be as thorough as possible because things are evolving. I know it sounds crazy, but with apps and things like that, there's always glitches, and there's always things where you actually, there's 52 different choices. I can't get everything right 100% of the time. So I general, and I'm evolving, because originally the Circus Question was going to be a book. And when we did the chapters together, I felt I could commit to the process, but I couldn't commit to the book per se, because the analogies are all changing and evolving gradually with usage. The app, I can press a button and change a definition or a template just like that. So it's evolving into the book gradually. So at some stage there will be a book, the Circus Question. So you'll be able to use it on your coffee table. But the interesting thing is, as well, is through the app, I've also identified love languages and attachment styles, which I kind of worked out, and I'm not sure if they're 100% perfect yet, and they're evolving as well. Because primary love language, I think that's a spectrum as well. And I love Gary Chapman, but at the end of the day, I really do think, I've got two. words of
Yeah.
affirmation, and physical
Mm.
touch. They are equal to me
It
as
did,
much as
when you
I
were talking
need
about
that partner.
the app and the concept of it, it did remind me of like attachment styles and love language and things like that. So it's interesting that that's coming out. In terms of your like links and things, what I'll do is I'll put them on the notes for this podcast as well, so people can connect with you.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you so much for your time, Andreas. It was so interesting, and I know there's so much more to come. So I'm excited to see where it all goes. So thank you, Andreas.
Don't forget to plug our
I will do.
books.
Yeah, we'll
Don't
put the
forget to plug
links
our
to the
books.
books.
Coaching Corner.
Amazing.
Brilliant.
Thanks,
It's all in there.
Andreas. All
Lovely. Thank you,
right,
Sarah.
there we go. It should have stopped now. Has it stopped for you? Amazing. Okay, I think I might have to cut it down into bits.